What's up, folks? This is Addy Ads. This is Public Intelligence, and we have a really fun podcast today for a true crime podcast here in Public Intelligence. I'm here with Rick Garzaniti, and Rick has a very interesting story. He's also a published author, and we're going to get to that kind of in the second half of the interview here. Please let us know how our audio's doing. I'm using a mic that I don't usually do. It sounds like the audio is good. But I wanted to introduce you, Rick, as the guy who got Ted Bundy arrested. And I don't know too much about you besides, but could you give an introduction to the audience and tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name is Rick Garzaniti, and I'm actually I'm a licensed massage therapist. I've been doing massage since 1987, but I've been in the medical profession since January of 1968, so 54 years now.
Okay.
And during that time, I started out as a medic in the Air Force, all right, and then I did 2.5 years at a emergency room at Reeves Air Force Base outside of Lubbock, Texas, and then I went from there. I went to Vietnam for 15 months, and my experience in Vietnam was way different than most other people's. Vietnam for me was fun.
Oh,
imagine that, right?
You're a Vietnam veteran.
Yeah.
What was that like, and why was it fun?
Well, it was fun because I didn't see any combat. I was in the Air Force, and I was stationed at a dispensary in Da Nang, at the Da Nang Air Base. So when the guys would get injured in the field, they would go to their respective field hospitals, and then they would, when they were stable enough to handle the 13 or 14-hour flight back to the States for further rehab, we would get them during the day, and then we would keep them overnight, during which time we would change their IVs, rebandage their wounds, and feed them if they needed help being fed. And then the next morning, we would put them on special buses, with stretcher hangers on it, so we could, put them on there. We'd drive them out to the flight line, and then we would help the flight crew load them onto the 747s, which were configured as a hospital ship. All right, medevac, they called it, a medical evacuation. But we were never allowed to board that aircraft. I think they were afraid that we might not want to get off, So, I always saw the outside of the aircraft. But what was fun about it was we would pick out, me and my friends, we would pick out the guys who were the hippies kind of guys, who were over there, who didn't really want to be in Vietnam. And we could tell when they walked in, they were ambulatory, and their hair was a little bit longer. They had like beaded necklaces or peace sign medallions. We were wearing them. And so I said, okay, man. So when these guys would come in, we'd tell them, we're going to come and get you after the lights go out. And at 10 p.m., we turn out the lights, and we go around to these different beds and get these guys up, and we take them up on the roof and party with them. So, yeah, and they were, we had the party materials, we had the munchies, we had some good music, the recent music. And there was so many of those guys would say, man, this is the best night I've ever had in Vietnam. I will never forget you guys. So I was doing a service that way too, not only the medical care, but to boost up their morale too, that they were going home.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah.
How long was your tour?
That was 15 months.
Okay.
Usually it was a year, but I stayed an extra 3 months extra. But then when I got out, I did that's when I went to, I took a year off, and then I became an orderly, like a nurse assistant.
Okay.
In the local hospital. And I did that for 2.5 years. And then I became a EMT during that time, emergency medical technician. But I never did anything with that. I stayed working with the inpatients at the hospital. And then in 1987, I took a massage therapy course and became a licensed massage therapist. And so I did that. But in 19, back up a few years, 1980, I actually became a paramedic. And I did that for 11 years, close to 11 years.
Hmm.
Here in Tallahassee, I worked on the ambulance. I worked on the medical, like a life flight, which was a helicopter transport. And they had a Lear jet,
Oh,
too, that we could transport people.
fancy
And
jet.
it was amazing. It would be normally it's a 5 hour drive from Tallahassee to Atlanta. Well, we would take the patients with GI bleeds. They were bleeding internally, and we would fly them up to the hospital in Emory University, where they had a specialist that specialized in GI bleeds. Well, I clocked it one time. We took off from Tallahassee. We lifted off of the runway at 11:25 in the morning. We landed in Atlanta at the Charlie Brown Airport at 11:50. 25 minutes.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's amazing.
from Tallahassee, and I was thinking, I got to get me one of these planes. This is too cool, But so I mean, this whole thing has just been a blast, helping other people heal and relieve their pain and help assist them.
Hmm.
And so
And you were drafted into Vietnam originally?
actually, I volunteered. Imagine that, you know what I mean? Because I knew if I was getting tired of Lubbock, Texas. Lubbock, Texas was actually Buddy Holly's hometown. And there were a lot of, pickup truck drivers and tobacco chewing people. And I just thought, these are not my people. But there were some very nice people that I met. My friends, civilians were really nice people. But I just got tired of being in the same place for 2.5 years. So I knew if I volunteered for Hawaii or Germany, I'd still be in Lubbock, Texas.
Hmm.
So I volunteered for Vietnam. And sure enough, I was right, within a month. Boom, I got my orders to go to Vietnam, and that's when I went to Da Nang. And because I kind of knew instinctively what I was reading in the newspaper were kind of biased.
Mm.
The newspaper articles were saying that like there were 87 enemy soldiers, enemy troops were killed, and 6 Allied soldiers were killed. So you know what I mean? It was like lopsided like that. Everything was way more enemy was killed than when the U.S. or Allied losses.
Hmm.
And I thought, you know what? I don't believe this is all bullshit. So I wanted to see for myself. I wanted to know the truth. So I said, well, I'll just go over there and find out. Well, as our flight was approaching Da Nang Air Base, and I looked down at the Da Nang runway, and there must have been like 200 caskets lined up side by side and maybe 5 rows deep. You know what I mean? It's just like boom, 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 just a field full of a runway just full of caskets.
Mm.
And that's when I knew that somebody in Da Nang does not know how to count. There was way more than half a dozen people that were killed there. There were like too many caskets for what I was reading to be accurate.
And you now know about the heroin being shipped in the caskets back to the States?
I didn't know about that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting though, because you could go into town and even on base, and the mama-sans, the ladies who would clean the barracks, they would have these little vials that was no bigger than the tip of your finger, like that. Maybe I said it was maybe like that much, just that little bit, and it would be like $10 for a vial of cocaine. They say, you want cocaine? And I say, no, I don't want to deal with that. And it turns out that was 96 or 98% pure heroin.
Jeez.
So there were a lot of guys who were doing that cocaine that were actually doing heroin. And I mean, I even worked on some friends of mine who were overdosing on it. And one guy from another squadron, he came to the hospital. He was overdosing, and he got on the bed, and he was like taking his fist and like pounding the metal headboards, the metal strips on the headboard of the bed, and he was like punching it as hard as he could because he was going through some shit.
Mm.
And I said, man, so I pulled a pillow, and we were the only ones in that bay at that time. There were no other patients, and sometimes the incoming flights were postponed for whatever reason. And so anyway, he was on one of the other beds, and he was like punching it. So I just, I got to help my friend. I didn't want to get in his way. He wasn't mad at me. So I grabbed a couple of pillows off the nearby beds, and I put it between him and the headboard, so he was punching the pillows instead. Mm-hmm. So I goes, okay, this is good. I felt good about it, and I, helped him get through that.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, um, but yeah. So and there was a time I actually got sick while I was there. I had 106 fever. And
106.
yeah, it was
That is
106. And
wow.
the nurse, because they put me in, they admitted me overnight to check
Hmm.
it out. And during the night, I, I had this vision of I was laying in bed, and I turned over to my right, looked over to actually I was laying out face up, and I looked over to my left, and there was a chair sitting like about where you are next to the bed, where someone could come and visit. But of course, the soldiers, the troops didn't have any visitors because they were just there for one day. And but anyway, this friend of mine was, in this vision, he was sitting next to me, and while I was looking at him, his face and his whole body just started to deteriorate, like what do I say?
Like melting?
Deconstruct. Like, well, it wasn't melting, but it was just disappearing, like a time lapse photograph of the muscle, the layers. The skin would disappear, and then the muscles underneath it would kind of deteriorate, and then you'd see the bones in his face would all be deteriorated till it was just a skull. And then his skull, with his chin and his top of his head, inverted. Okay, so now his chin was up on top, and the top of his head was down here, and his neck, and then a whole bunch of hair just started like sprouting out of the top of from his chin, like from the middle, parted in the middle. It was just boom, boom, like waterfall just coming out. And I'm going, well, this is interesting. Okay, and I wasn't. I mean, it was just kind of like, it was.
You were dreaming, or
Well, I don't know what it was, because I think it might have been from the fever.
oh,
Could
you
have
were
been
like
a fever,
hallucinating,
like a
delirium.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then next thing I know, this I pointed my finger, and I aimed it at the wall above me, and I went foop like that, and this rope shot out and hooked into the wall, behind me. And then I did the same thing on the wall to the right of me, to the left of me, and I went over here into the wall, and and I surrounded myself with this rope. It was like three different places, and then there was a sheet, and I took the sheet, and I had the sheet hanging over all three of these things. And a friend of mine showed up in this vision, and it had what do you call it? A matchbox, and it had magic dust written on it. So I said, "What is this?" He said, "Just blow into it." So I did. I put some of the dust in my hand, and I blew into it, like, and it went up on the sheet in front of me, the white sheet. And as soon as it hit the sheet, it burst into three different colors, like like the old Walt Disney opening, like the Wonderful World of Disney. And Tinkerbell would come out and then, touch the screen in three different places, and the colors would come out and scream. Well, that's exactly what that was like. I'm going, wow, this is pretty cool. So I didn't know what was happening, but I wasn't suffering. So anyway, and then, then that's it. I woke up the next morning, and a very clear memory of, what happened, but I was fine. So they treated me successfully with whatever IV they had given me. And,
Did you witness any combat yourself?
no, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
In fact, Addie, was when I get off work, we could actually go to the South China Beach and go body surfing, in the crystal clear waters of the South China Sea. We even had guys that had sent home for their scuba gear, and they were going scuba diving off the coral reefs.
Oh wow.
It was like a home away from home.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. I was from Michigan. So, I used to, scuba diving off coral reefs or going body surfing in the lakes. You don't have much of that going on in the lake.
Where in Michigan are you from?
Suburban Detroit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Little
Detroit.
town called Allen Park.
Allen Park.
Right.
Okay. Another Midwesterner. I'm from
Yeah.
Wisconsin.
Oh,
so,
okay, cool.
Yeah. My mother's family is actually from Michigan originally.
Okay,
Some
yeah.
of them are. So.
I fled Michigan in '72.
Yeah.
November. It was 9 degrees the day I left.
That's a good reason to flee the Midwest.
Yeah.
Cold winters.
I said, there's no reason, there's not enough room in Michigan for me in 9-degree weather.
Sure.
So
sure.
I came down to Florida.
I remember when I came back from Guam, it was the coldest winter I'd ever experienced. It was a polar vortex, -40 with wind chill multiple days.
Wow, that's
yeah,
crazy.
Yeah, well, really, really cold up there in Wisconsin and
Yeah.
Michigan and the Midwest. So Vietnam vet, I actually didn't know that. That's a bucket list for me. I've wanted to interview a Vietnam vet for a while now. I met one, and we had a great time together. He showed me around. And initially he said yes, but then he said no. He's a combat veteran, so he saw a lot of bad stuff, so he just kind of wanted to keep it between us, which is totally cool. But I learned quite a bit from him, and likewise with yourself, because I don't have anybody in my family that fought in that war, so I find it interesting that you had that experience, and it was a lot different, I think, than a lot of veterans.
Oh yeah, because like I said, I was there to help people, who had been through that situation. There was one guy that always stands out in my mind, and he was what we called a stoner. Okay, you had the stoners, the people who would smoke, and then the juicers were the guys who had signed up for 20 years and they'd go to the club and spend all their money on alcohol. Every paycheck they would go and get drunk and rowdy and blah blah blah. But we were stoners, so we'd party up on the roof, or we'd have a place in the barracks. Even they had a place in the barracks for us where we could hang out and accumulate, gather. But this guy came in and he was ambulatory, and I said, well, what's up with you? And because he didn't look like he was injured, and he said, man, I got shrapnel in my ass. Yeah, and I said, oh my gosh, like that. And then I said, well, how'd that happen? And he said, well, that just shows you how deep a hole I could dig before that mortar went off. I laughed. I go, oh my God, I like this guy, So I talked to him later. He was one of the guys I went to, like, we're going to come and get you after 10 o'clock and we're going to take you up on the roof. But because he was ambulatory. So anyway, he told me later that he was like a platoon commander or something. I don't know what the ranks are in the army.
Yeah,
but he was
different
supposed to
ranks,
take his troops out to someplace and search and destroy. They were supposed to search and find the Viet Cong and shoot them, and engage them in combat. Well, these were all stoners. They were all, young guys. They didn't want to shoot anybody. They didn't want to get shot,
Yeah.
And so I said, well, so he kept getting in trouble. So he told me that one day, he said because his base commander kept getting on him, they went out and they dug a trench. They dug like a foxhole, basically, and they were partying. They fired them up, and then they started shooting their guns off in the air and throwing grenades, just throwing them out into the field, so it would sound good over the radio. We got enemy contact. All this stuff was going on, and he said to make it look good, he called for artillery backup. He gave them the coordinates, and so the artillery shells were flying over their head and bombing the woods in front of them. There was nobody living there. They made sure that nobody was going to get hurt, but they were just, So I said, man, I like this guy. It was so cool, to have him share this story with me. I go,
it's sad that they had to pretend to kill people to do their job. Because they didn't actually want to kill people.
I know, yeah. Like I said, but it was nice to know that there were people like that, that were, fighting the war kind of thing. That they didn't want to be there. Nobody wanted to be there.
It reminds me of a story from Band of Brothers when they get reordered to cross a river and capture some Germans, and both tactically and strategically, it had no effect on the war. It was an officer trying to push his career forward with another successful mission, basically. And I think he was a major at the time, Dick Winters. He told them to report that they had gone over the river a second time because they lost a man before in the night. And he said, basically, he didn't spell it out, but he said, don't go across the river. Tell me you went across the river, because he didn't want to lose men unnecessarily. Kind of reminds me of that a little bit.
Yeah, that's good.
And so it sounds like when he came back from the war, it wasn't too difficult to readjust because your experience was not that traumatic compared to someone who's in combat.
No, there was no PTSD whatsoever. I mean, like I said, I had fun.
Yeah.
And but we even did LSD. We had one of the guys from California say, "Hey, we're getting some LSD next month," and that was cool, from a friend in California. Yeah. We did that like 2 or 3 times while I was there, and went to the beach. But so yeah, we got out, and actually I got out in like '71, and it was November '71, and then I took a year off, and then in the end of '72, around October, November '72. I heard about this guy, and I was looking for inner peace. I mean, remember I said I wanted to know the truth. Is why I volunteered for Vietnam. Well, something happened there that just was unbelievable. I sat on the barrack step one night, and we were 2-story barracks, and I sat up there and I was just thinking about what was happening. The insanity of what was going on, and you could hear, the Marble Mountain was close to Da Nang. And it was a Marine base, and they would have these big guns. I always think of the Guns of Navarone movie, but it was big guns, and you could hear them firing, shells off in the distance, And I just thought, man, this is insane. And I felt so helpless because I was just, what was I going to do as one single person, one individual, to stop this craziness, you know? All these young kids were coming over there and getting killed or maimed for the rest of their lives. And I'm going, this is totally crazy. And I started crying. I mean, literally, the tear, I was so deep. And I was crying, and I just felt like, man, what can I do? I'm just one person. What can I do? What can I do? And after about 20 minutes of this going over in my head, because I knew that some, people were wearing suits in D.C. or wherever they were directing all this stuff, and just they didn't care about their lives being lost. They were doing it for some other reason, And then during that time, about 20 minutes in, I was just up there by myself, and it was, fairly quiet night except for the shells going off, But I mean, I was crying. And all of a sudden, this voice came to me. You can't change the world, but you can change yourself. And I went, whoa, and it made total sense to me. Because even though I'm one individual among 6 billion people at that year, said 1971, I'm one individual. I'm like one piece of that puzzle of 6 billion pieces. But without my piece fitting in there, the puzzle's not complete.
Mm-hmm.
So I realized, okay, wow, so that began my search, my journey for like looking within myself, because I wanted to learn how to change myself. So when I got back, I stayed in Pasadena for a while, and I did the people I was staying with had a book called Be Here Now, and it was by Baba Ram Dass at the time. That was his name, Baba Ram Dass, and he was a good friend of Timothy Leary. And they were researching, LSD and psilocybin. So I goes, I'm going to read this man's book, because I wanted to see what he was doing, what he was getting into. So I read that book. First book I read from cover to cover, pretty much. But it was amazing. He really introduced me to a lot of different things, and that began what got me interested even more. Mm-hmm. Well, I was going through different things, and I got back to Michigan. And I went to the Hare Krishna temple for one day in Detroit. I went to some Integral Hatha Yoga Institute. I was trying yoga.
Mm-hmm.
And
trying new things.
Trying whatever, trying these different things. Well, I chanted the Hare Krishna mantra for 2 hours straight when I was at my parents' house. They went out for dinner or somewhere and didn't feel any different. So, okay. And then I was one Saturday morning, I was doing the yoga. And it was interesting. I thought, this is getting to the Ted Bundy part, by the way. Okay.
No, this is great.
Yeah.
Please.
So anyway, I was doing the yoga, and while I was doing the asana, again, that inner voice came to me and said, wait a minute. If God is within me right now, why can't I experience it right now? Why do I have to wait 15, 20 years and 25 years or more doing these positions as yoga every day?
Yeah.
And then maybe get closer and closer and closer, and then boom, get hit by a bus. There was no guarantee that I was going to get there through doing yoga.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like such a long process.
Why do I have to go without if it's within?
Already there, And so I said, okay, well that's it, I'm done, So I stopped doing yoga. My parents were both working, so I went out in the kitchen. I was in Detroit, and there was a Detroit Free Press on the table, the morning Free Press. And so I started thumbing through it while I was eating breakfast. And way back on page 14A was this little article in the corner. And at the bottom of page 14A, and it says 14-year-old Guru Maharaji had like 7 jumbo jets of his followers follow him to India for a week-long celebration. So I'm thinking, okay, 14-year-old kid, Guru Maharaji, there's a new kid on the block. Now I got someone else to check out. So I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. So I didn't think much of it. I just thought, that's that,
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, this, and so I said, well, I'll check him out, sometime. I'll find out what's going on. So anyway, later that afternoon, my mother came home about 2 o'clock from her job at the Hallmark gift store.
Okay.
And she handed me this, like a magazine type booklet.
Okay.
And it had Guru Maharaji's picture on the cover. And I thought, well, this is interesting. And it was had maybe 6 or 8 different of his discourses in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, this is interesting. So all these three things happened within the same day. Okay, I woke up, I was doing the yoga, and I said, if God is within me right now, why can't I experience him right now? And then to see that article in the newspaper about Guru Maharaji, and then my mother coming home with this book with his cover picture on the cover, and his main message is, what you are looking for is within you. I can help you connect with that. I'm going, oh my God, that was too much of a coincidence.
Synchronicity.
You know? The synchronicity was just all boom, boom, like lined up perfectly.
Is that destiny?
Yeah, that's what I feel it was. I was being led, you know, and I thought, okay, there's a reason for this, you know. So I did. I was about ready to come back to Tallahassee, to come down to Tallahassee, because my dad told me, Rick, you know, you reach a point where you have to, you know, get under your parents' wings, out from under your wings, and move out on your own. Well, I had a friend of mine in Vietnam who had moved to Tallahassee, he and his family. So I said, well, if I move to Tallahassee, I won't be a stranger there. My friend Paul will be here. And so I left. Well, then when I got to Tallahassee, I started reading Maharaji's discourse. Well, I ended up I moved. I didn't know where I was. It was a brand new place. Well, at that time, Maharaji had a place called Divine Light Mission, and I would walk to visit my friend to the hospital here. He was a dispatcher for the ambulance service. Well, on the way to the hospital, there was a Divine Light Mission right around the corner from where I moved. Another synchronicity. So I said, well, that's that Guru Maharaji's place. You know, check it out. You know, so I went in one day, hadn't smoked anything, and I was open, and the guy was telling me about what was happening, and I was getting high from the conversation. These guys were telling me like things like, I said, well, you know, I said, man, this is amazing. Everything they were telling me was like, you know, jacked me up a little bit more. And the guy said, well, you get high, you know. He said, do you smoke pot? And I'm going, duh. My hair was down a little bit longer, and I'm looking like, what do you think, you know? And I said, well, yeah. And he said, well, because you like to get high. I was, yeah. He said, well, if you knew what it was that's getting high within you, you could feel that way all the time. And I thought, that, you know, jacked me up a couple more notches, because it was true. I'm going, my God, that makes so much sense. So anyway, I found out at the time there were 3 instructors in the States. One was in California, one was in New York, and one was in Detroit.
Wow.
So I got on the road with $1.24 in my pocket, and I hitchhiked. I had a sign that said I-75, you know, as long as my arm. I wrote it out, you know, it was I-75. And then I flipped it over the sign and put Michigan. I spelled it out. So when I got to 75, I could just hold that out. And I got to Michigan in like 22 hours. Just hitching like that, you know.
From Florida?
From Florida.
Wow.
And I had
back when you could hitchhike.
Yeah, it was fine. And with $1.24. And the guy, and so that's all that is included in my book. Okay.
Excellent.
This you know, journey to this.
Yeah, bring it close to it. Here we go.
Okay.
Well, there we go. One man's path to inner peace, and I can actually bring it up too. There it is.
Yeah, well, there you go. So anyway,
on the Amazon. So.
Oh, it's a different color.
Here, let's do this.
But anyway, while you're doing that, there you go.
Yes, this is Journey to the Center of My Heart. One Man's Path to Inner Peace. Ricky G is the author. A nom de plume.
Nom de plume. Yeah, my first name is really Ricky, R-I-C-K-Y. Last initial is G. So I just made it Ricky G. I have a friend who calls me Ricky G. So I just made it all one word and spelled it like that.
Everything in this story actually happened. No exaggerations or embellishments were added.
Yeah.
Part 1 begins with Ricky G's volunteering to be reassigned to Vietnam. While stationed at the 366 United States Air Force Dispensary at the Da Nang Air Force Base as a medic, he received a message from the inner voice, which literally turned out to be one of the secrets of life. A message that continues to positively influence his perception of life more than 48 years later.
Yeah.
His path includes plenty of synchronicities, coincidences, and even telepathy, which led directly to Ricky G's learning how to bridge the gap between his finite self and the infinite that resides within each one of us. The gift he received cost him nothing. Part 1 also includes his life as a stoned-out, beach-going, frisbee-throwing, body-surfing medic when not taking care of wounded U.S. and Allied veterans in Vietnam. Love found and love lost. Part 2 continues with a few short stories. including his inadvertent role in the capture of Ted Bundy, delivering his son at a planned home birth, his encounter with an unseen entity during his paramedic life, helping a dying man during his transition to the other side, being visited by a family of spirits in North Carolina, a homeopathic remedy mysteriously manifesting while he slept, his experience with an armed robber who held a .45 caliber pistol to his head, how strictly adhering to ethics might not have been his best decision, and what he learned from his out-of-body experience while hydroplaning at 65 miles per hour. An interesting story for sure. As Ricky G says, with the exception of life itself, being taught for free how to connect to inner peace has proven to be, by far, the most practical gift I have ever received. And again, that is available on Amazon for purchase in paperback and Kindle. A very affordable $7.88 for the paperback. So I highly recommend people check that out.
Thank you.
Yeah. And is there anything you, before we get to Mr. Bundy?
Well, this is what happened now. See, that's where the what I said about this Maharaji. Okay, he dropped the guru part years ago, and the title. Maharaj is actually a title of respect. Maha means great, Raj means king. All right. Well, his followers called him Maharaji. All right. And the guru actually means, Gu means darkness, Ru means light. So a guru takes you from darkness to light. Okay. And you know, too, I had a friend of mine here in Tallahassee, Janet, and she said that she told me once, you know, when you spell guru out loud, it's G, U, R, U. I go, okay, cool. Thank you, Janet. That's in my book too. I had to add Janet's wisdom.
Sweet.
But so anyway, it was Maharaji changed his name, so it went to his real name, Prem Rawat. All right.
Okay.
And so I received knowledge. That's on January 20th, 1973. The 4 techniques that I learned, how to connect, how to turn my attention from outside to inside. Okay, because that's where it is, right? I mean, that was that epiphany that I had. You know, you can't change the world, but you can change yourself. So I mean, when I made this connection, when I got that experience, I knew that my search was over. Okay, I knew that I'd found what I was looking for. Well, I went to a program, one of Prem Rawat's events. It was either St. Louis or Kansas City, somewhere in Missouri. But anyway, it was in the early part of February, 1978. And during that event, when I go to his programs, I feel like he is talking. I can be in with 20,000 people. I've been to programs where there were 20,000 people, or 200 people, and it doesn't matter how many people. I feel like it's just him talking to me in his living room. It's that personal. And so at that event, I mean, he did the same thing at this event in St. Louis or Kansas City. But anyway, and as I was leaving, I thought, you know, I said, he knows more about me than I know about myself. Not about my personal life, but about who I really am. You know, what's really inside of me, what connects us, everybody. And so, and then it was right around that time, just before that program, the Chi Omega event happened at Florida State University, where someone had gone in and brutally murdered like 2 or 3 of the sorority sisters, and you know, raped them and bit their body parts off, and went around a corner and, you know, and raped and killed, you know, a couple more, 1 or 2 more women, or brutally beat them. And it was like this person was still on the loose. All right. So, and I was leaving the program, driving back to Florida. I had my little Volkswagen, and I was driving back to Florida, and I thought, Prem Rawat knows more about me than I know about myself. I should have asked him, as if I would ever really have a chance to talk to him personally. I should have asked him to show me who killed those girls on the Florida State campus. And that was it. Well, 2 weeks later, I was married at the time. My daughter was 18 months old. We took her to my sister-in-law's house to babysit. All right. We went out for dinner. We came back. We were going to pick up my daughter, and just, you know, pick her up, go back, and go home. Well, while we were at my sister-in-law's, we were about to leave. I had my daughter in my arm over my shoulder, and this ABC Sunday night movie came on, and it was Gator with Burt Reynolds.
Okay.
So I said, well, that's, you know, I've seen parts of Burt Reynolds movies, always the same cast of characters, you know, all his friends were there. But they seemed to have a lot of fun. So I said, well, let's stay and watch this movie. It's okay. So we stayed and watched the movie. And at 11 o'clock, we were about ready to leave. At 10:30, my brother-in-law came home. He had been bowling on his bowling league Sunday night. So he came home about 10:30, half hour before the movie ended. So we after the movie ended, we picked up Jamie again, Jamie, and we were walking out the door, and I was walking towards where I parked the car, directly across the street from my sister-in-law's house, and it wasn't there. And I looked over to my right, and I thought maybe I parked it in the drive, and no, it's not there either, you know. So I said, well, maybe it rolled down the hill because it was at the top of a hill. But then I thought, no, I mean it's just too level for it to roll down the hill. It was totally flat. Plus, I always set the emergency brake. And then I actually stepped down off the curb and was in the middle of the street. I just kept walking because it didn't register in my head that my car. And then finally, it dawned on me. Said, no matter how close you get to that parking space, your car is not going to be there.
Right.
So, and I just finally I was like, oh, now what? So I turned around and I went back in and I asked my brother-in-law. I said, Jim, was my car parked in front of your house when you came home a half hour ago? He goes, yeah, it was. And then he goes, oh, no, don't tell me. I'm going, yeah, it's not there now. And he goes, oh, no. So I called the police department and I reported it. And I remember Gary Lassiter from the Tallahassee Police Department. He had been serving since 1974. I remember that. It's interesting. And he took the information. And I had a feeling while I was telling him this, I said, I kept feeling like this is going to be more than a stolen vehicle. There's something about it. I can't put my finger on it. And even the cop, thought the same. I could tell he was feeling the same thing because he was kind of like, are you sure about this tag number, his license plate number? I goes, yes, sir, 13D 15864. I travel around a lot, and back then you'd have to write your license plate number when you registered for the hotel.
Okay.
And so I wrote it down enough that I just memorized it. He goes, okay. Well, 2 days later, I get a call from the Pensacola Police Department. All right. And I was working construction at the time. All right. And the only time I was ever in my boss's office, the phone rang. And my boss answered. He goes, yeah, he's right here. It's Rick's for you. I'm thinking, what are the chances that somebody would be calling and I'd be standing right there? Another synchronicity, right? And so, and it was the Pensacola Police Department. They asked me if I knew a guy named Ken Meisner. I said, no, I don't know him. He goes, okay, well, we've got your car. You can come and get it. I go, oh, cool. They found my car within 2 days. Took a 5-hour bus trip. My boss gave me the next day off. Took a 5-hour bus trip from Tallahassee to Pensacola. And I got there and Sergeant Underwood said, you think, how long have you been in Tallahassee? I told him about 6 years at that time. He said, do you think you can identify somebody if you saw them? I said, sure, I'll give it a shot. So he sat me in this big office. There were like typewriters everywhere. And I remember his name was Sergeant Underwood because every typewriter had typewriters. There were computers in the 70s, but they were typewriters, and every typewriter had Underwood on it. So they were Underwood typewriters. I don't know if it was a family or not, but it was just a coincidence. But anyway, so he said, now they'll be coming out that door right there, the investigators. He said the investigators will be wearing a tie. He said, we want you to identify the guy without the tie. I said, okay. So sure enough, maybe 5 minutes later, the door opened up and these 3 or 4 investigators came out with the ties. Then the guy came out without a tie, and he was smoking a cigarette, and he turned over and looked at me, and he took one more drag off his cigarette, one more hit, and he put it on the ground, he stepped on it, and then he just kept on walking. And he was followed by another investigator. They wanted to keep him, in between them. But he was followed by them, so he followed them out. And then I said, nope, I don't recognize him. And so anyway, then I was told that they were going to have to keep my car because they thought they thought he had something to do with the Chi Omega incident, on the Florida State. And I'm going, oh man, I got to take another 5-hour bus trip back. Well, and then another coincidence, there happened to be a meeting of the North Florida detectives at the Pensacola Police Department that day. So the head of the Tallahassee detective unit offered to give me a ride back in his car. I'm going, awesome. All right. So, sure enough, I didn't know who he was. They didn't know who he was. Ken Meisner was an alias, and apparently our local CBS station mentioned it on the local news. Tallahassee track star Ken Meisner was arrested today in a stolen vehicle in Pensacola, Florida. Well, Ken Meisner was sitting at home watching TV. He goes, "Well, I'm Ken Meisner. What do you have? I'm not in Pensacola." So anyway, it was later on that night, that same night, Tuesday night, the FBI identified my car thief as Ted Bundy.
He was the guy who hid the cigarette right in front of you.
Right, he was the guy that was stolen my vehicle, and the FBI had placed him on their 10 most wanted list like the day before.
Oh.
So there you go, and that's how that connection happened.
But he was the one that they walked in front of you? That was Bundy?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How close were you to him?
I mean, he was probably maybe 15 feet or so, because like I said, I was in the middle of an office, and he was along the wall to my left. They were coming out of an office, on the back of the room, and he was walking past me like that. So anyway, this went on, and they had him arrested, and they had him in the Leon County Jail. And eventually, he was going to represent himself, and so he called me. He summoned me, deposed. Is that what it is when they
deposition? Yep.
A deposition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they got a deposition to show up at the third floor of the county jail, Leon County Jail, and there were a bunch of other people there, a lot of young girls, and they were like servers at a local restaurant that Ted used to frequent near the campus. And so and Ted was in his element then. He was like the head of the class. Everybody was sitting there, and he was at a desk in front, and there was a couple of big deputies, one at the only door, and one off to his right and my left. And so they had him they weren't going to let him get out. And no windows that I remember. And anyway, he started asking questions. And it was amazing. He was just like, he was very charismatic.
Yeah.
And personable. You could see how he could, get people to trust him.
Handsome too.
Yeah, but so anyway, I remember him asking one question of one of the servers. He said, "Well, what did he said, what did you think about me?" And they said, "Well, we called you." They recognized him because he went there a lot, the restaurant. And she said, "Well, we called you a 10%er." And he said, "What's that?" And she said, "That's someone who tips exactly 10% every time." And so she said, "Oh, that's that 10%er." He goes, "Oh, okay." And then he said, "Well, what did you think when you found out it might have been me who was who committed the incident on the campus?"
Mm-hmm.
And the waitress, the server said, "Oh shit!" And Ted laughed. He goes, "Yeah, that'd have been my response too, my reaction too. Kind of like he went along with it. So that was my first encounter with him. All right, he saved me till last. I don't remember what he asked me, but I mean it was like okay, I was done. Well, I thought I was done. The second time I saw him, they were going to interview him for a pretrial conference at the Live Oak City Hall. All right, and turns out that Live Oak was the home of Kimberly Leach, a 12-year-old girl who was his last victim. All right, she was a 12-year-old that he picked up, and they found her like in a pig pen or something like that. And so anyway, so they had me go in and I got there early, and there was an old lady at this old courthouse that had been over 100 years old, and so she was she fit the decor of the office, and anyway she was sitting at the counter at the desk at the reception desk, and I introduced myself. I said, "I'm here. I got deposed to give a statement." And she goes, "Okay, well, we're not quite set up yet, but go in the room behind me. You'll see you'll have a chair on the right side of the table there. As you walk in, you'll see it." Okay. So I walked in. There was a chair at the end of the table. It's like, a long table, rectangular table. And so I was sitting on the end. Ted was sitting on the very end, right next to me. And Ted's lawyer was sitting on the opposite side of this, that opposite edge of the table, on that part of it, So anyway, and I walked in, and Ted looked up at me and goes, "Hey, how's it going?" It's kind of friendly, and I goes, "No, it's going good," And I looked, and his lawyer said, "You've met?" And Ted said, "Well, I took his deposition in Leon County, So, and the lawyer said, "Oh, okay." So anyway, the old lady comes in with a handheld, portable cassette player.
Oh.
All right, and
throwback.
It was like I said, it was like none of this, and so anyway, so she set it down kind of in the middle of the table. The judge sat at the far left of the table, okay, at the far end of that, the far end of the table, And then so they had the prosecution on one side and the defense on the other. Okay, I'll sit on the defense side. And so anyway, no, I said on the prosecution side.
Yep.
So
Yep.
anyway, so this lady's walking over. She has this extension cord, and she's walking over everybody's head like this. She's walking along, and she goes, "Well, I get my table, my power from this outlet, the only outlet in this room. But if they're using anything upstairs, there won't be enough power to power this tape recorder." And she's doing this while she's walking along with her arm over everybody's head, with this extension cord. And Ted looked at me and said, "Wonder how they managed in the 1870s." I kind of laughed. Yeah, even then, I mean, there's his own, pre-trial conference. He's making jokes. I'm going, okay, good. This guy's relaxed. So I said, okay. So anyway, so that was my second encounter with him. The third time, they moved his trial from Live Oak because they figured it was too close to Kimberly Leach, and they changed the venue to Orlando. I got to Orlando, and I knew my lawyers had told me everything, all the questions they were going to ask me was totally scripted. I mean, I knew what they were going to ask. I knew what I was going to answer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I got sworn in, and I mean, as soon as I walked in, I don't know if you ever saw that sitcom, Night Court.
I haven't.
Okay, it was years ago. Well, it was just like that. I mean, I'd never been in a courtroom where the judge sat way up high. I mean, I had to look up, like, pretty high to see the judge where the judge was sitting. And then the jury was so close to me, I could shake their hands. I mean, it was right, so I had to kind of walk in sideways. Well, anyway, I got sworn in, and I sat down, and when I get uncomfortable or want to make myself comfortable, I cross one leg over the other, just like that to get comfortable. Well, there was a wooden panel in front of me where my leg kept bouncing in. I couldn't cross my leg. So I'm sitting there nervous because I got all these people in the courtroom looking at me. There were TV cameras at the back of the courtroom. All right, and they're pointed at me, and I mean, and then I'm going, oh my God, I got stage fright. I'm going, oh my God, I was clammed up. I go, oh my God, and so I looked, and the prosecution was sitting in front of me, and so I looked at it. My lawyers were sitting there, and then I looked over to my left, and there was Ted, and I mean, he was sitting at a table with his arm up like that, on the edge of the table. He was kind of kicked back and totally relaxed, slouched in his chair. I made eye contact with him, and he winked at me. And the instant he winked at me, I totally relaxed because it hit me. I said, I'm going to be talking about my stolen vehicle. This guy's on trial for murder, and if he's that relaxed, what do I have to be nervous about? And I mean, that's how charismatic he was. And I was just totally blown away, that he had that impact. So all of my encounters with Ted have been really pleasant, actually. I mean, there was just, I mean, I could tell, he was like I said, he was charismatic, he was personable,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't worship him, but I mean, I just kind of, felt, I said, well, it wasn't for me to judge him in any way.
Mm-hmm.
It's not why I was there,
Yeah.
but it was interesting that, to see that side of him and not see the other side of him, thankfully.
And that was the last time you saw him?
That was the last time I saw him.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a lot of people, thinking that, were rejoicing when the day he was executed. And,
Mm-hmm. He was electrocuted, right?
Yeah. There's a joke about that, too. That was Ted Bundy's last job. He was a conductor.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of dark humor.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. I have a lot of empathy for those people who lost loved ones to his crime spree.
Yeah.
And but you know what? I'll tell you this too, Addie. When I moved to Mexico for 5 months, and while I was there, I saw the Ted Bundy movie. All right, and it wasn't about his crime spree. It was more about how he was evading everybody and keeping his girlfriend, keeping her wondering, what was going on, and say, oh, that's not me. They think I did this. They think I did that, but they can't be, blah blah blah, and
Mm-hmm.
Making excuses.
Yeah.
Well.
That's the new one? The new movie?
It was
came out?
fairly recent.
Yeah, I've seen that with Zac Efron, the actor, the younger actor.
I said, yeah,
I saw that.
It wasn't. I think it was a TV one with
Yeah.
Mark somebody.
It was, okay.
But yeah, no, it was a fairly recent one. But it
Uh-huh.
was, like I said, it wasn't all about his crime spree.
Yeah.
But it was really well done. And near the end of it, I won't give a spoiler kind of thing, but when his girlfriend found out, because she went to visit him, and she found out that it really was him. He finally confessed to her.
Yep.
Now I ruined it, but
No, no, it's all right. Yeah.
but anyway, he when he confessed to her, she just walked out of the room and she went down the hallway and she just couldn't, she didn't know how to handle it. She just sat down in the hallway and just like this, because she knew, because it was her that gave the police Ted's name.
Mm-hmm.
And when that movie ended, right, a couple minutes after that scene, people were getting up and leaving the theater, and I couldn't move because I realized, I knew how she felt, because I provided information which led to his arrest,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and got him caught. And I thought, oh my God, I know how she feels, because she gave the name,
Mm-hmm.
and I provided information that directly led to his arrest. And I couldn't move for like 5 or 10. I had to literally force myself to get up and move after 10 minutes of just sitting there feeling like, man, this is a heavy responsibility.
Yeah.
But then I had to change my perspective a little bit, and just think, well, I got him off the street. I mean, that was the thing, he didn't need to.
Yeah.
And you know what, though, too, Eddie, I had a cassette in my cassette player in my car, and it was one of Prem Rawat's discourses. And I often wondered, did he ever listen to that cassette while he was driving my car? And and I had a feeling that he might have, because whenever I saw him, he kind of I could feel that he was kind of he could relate to me somehow. He was relating to me on a different level,
Mm-hmm.
on a deeper level than just almost just the person standing in front of him. I often wonder if maybe he was listening to that cassette a little bit more while he was parked behind those buildings in Pensacola, in the alley behind those buildings, and listening to that discourse.
Mm-hmm.
And I often wonder, if that discourse might have helped him decide, maybe he was ready to stop running,
Yeah.
and stop what he was doing, and he was just ready to give it up, to stop.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So I often wondered, that maybe there's someone who knows who could, tune into that psychically and let me know, find out if that was one of the possibilities that he was able to, that was part of his reasoning for getting caught.
Sure. Wow. Very crazy story. So
Yeah.
that's amazing that you were involved in that way, and purely because he stole your car. He happened to steal your car, and then so you saw him 3 times in total, or 4
Yeah,
times?
total.
3 times. Okay.
I sold my car not long afterwards to a guy in Orlando. He wanted to buy for his daughter's 16th birthday, her first vehicle. I told him the history of it. He said, that's fine, Sold it for $1,310 or $1,350. That was the Blue Book value, $1,300, $1,350 or somewhere around there. And I couldn't believe it, man. He said, about several months later, I got a phone call from the Maury Povich show. and they said, does the name Ted Bundy ring a bell? I go, yeah, of course it does. I said, yeah. And they said, do you know that there is a retired sheriff's deputy in New York who took a full-page ad in the New York Times advertising that he was selling the Volkswagen that Ted Bundy was arrested in for $20,000.
Wow.
I'm going, are you kidding me? And they go, no. I goes, well, that's fine. That's his karma. You know what I mean? I said, I sold it for what it was worth. And I said, I was done with it. I'm not, and because they were thinking about, the guy told me, he was a program director. And he said, we were thinking about doing a program called Making Money from Murder. And I said, well, I wasn't going to get involved with that. I mean, I could, I'll tell you my story, but I said, that's why I didn't sell it for any more. I thought about that. I thought about putting it in like the National Enquirer and get someone to the highest bidder kind of thing. So anyway, I didn't. So they didn't do the program, and it was even years after that. There's a local musician here in town who got discovered, so to speak, by a guy that worked at the recording studio, the same recording studio in Atlanta that records Bruce Springsteen's music.
Oh wow.
And he wanted Jesse to record some songs. So Jesse went up there to record his music. Well, it was Bruce Springsteen had gone over a couple of days that he was supposed to be finished with his recording. But so Jesse was hanging out there, and while he was hanging out, he met the members of um, Korn,
Oh.
Korn, with the R backwards,
Mm-hmm.
and he met them. And the one of the guitarists for Korn told Jesse, he said, "Man, you won't believe this. I just bought the Volkswagen that Ted Bundy was arrested in for $50,000." and Jesse knew me. And Jesse said, "Well, why would you do that?" And the guy said, "Are you kidding me? That's history. That's a piece of history right there. That's like a museum piece." So he said he bought it. But I couldn't believe it. I sold it for 1,300, and it ended up selling for 50,000. Who knows where somebody might sell it for now, if that guitarist still has it or not. But anyway, that's how I got it. And
Wow.
and one thing that bugged me at the time, the Tallahassee Democrat was offering a $16,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and capture of the person who killed those girls on Florida State campus. And so I applied for it. Well, and they said specifically, law enforcement officials are not eligible for this reward.
Sure.
That would make them bounty hunters. They would just, they would arrest everybody, hoping
Right.
they get the right person.
They're publicly funded.
Exactly. So anyway, but then later I learned that $5,000 of that reward was given to the arresting officer. And that's what happened to the rest of it. So I didn't hear about that. They didn't say, what happened. The Democrat didn't mention, Tallahassee Democrat didn't mention that. They just mentioned that, I think his name was David Lee, was the cop. He was the cop who arrested, who actually pulled him over and arrested him, cuffed him. But so I went to the Tallahassee Democrat, and I walked in and I spoke to Walker Lundy. He was an old man. He was like the managing editor of the Democrat. And I went over to him. I said, I introduced myself. I'm Rick Garzaniti. I said, I own the orange Volkswagen that Ted Bundy was arrested in, and I applied for the reward. And I said, but I didn't hear anything about it. And I said, but I heard that 5,000 of it was given to the arresting officer, but I didn't get anything. And I supplied the information that directly the tag number, the description of the vehicle that he was arrested in, and caught him. But I didn't get any. I said, what happened to the rest of that money? And that old fart, he was an old man, and he didn't even look at me. He turned his head the other way and said, "Oh, that money was given back to the people who donated it." Like I was a 12-year-old kid asking for a handout. I couldn't believe it, man. I just said,
wow.
That's
that was terrible.
It. Yeah.
That's.
So anyway, that was that. But like I said, it's Ted's gone. He's history. I'm part of that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Wow, fantastic story, sir. And I think it really makes us all angry and sad that you didn't get compensated in any way for.
Well, like I said, Mike, I had to accept the compensation is that I got him off the street.
Yeah.
And how many lives did that save?
Yeah, priceless.
Yeah.
For sure. Wow. We're at our hour here, sir, but I want to give you a chance to talk about your book a little bit more, or if you have anything else you wanted to.
No, that was it.
Okay.
Just my book. It's an easy read. It's like 100 pages.
Okay.
My sister read it in one day, and there's some real life stories in here. And actually, there's one story. How close are we to the hour here?
Oh, we got as much time as you want, sir.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
There's one story I would like to share that I actually applied this knowledge. It's called the gift of knowledge. That's the 4 techniques that Prem Rawat teaches. It's called knowledge. Not just any knowledge, but knowledge of who you really are, of how to connect with the source within yourself with every breath. Okay? That breath that just came into me, that came into you, has never been in our bodies ever before in our entire life. Okay? It comes from who knows where. It goes out to who knows where. It's replaced by another one. But with each breath comes that gift of life. You hear about trying to live in the moment?
Mm-hmm.
Can't get any more in the moment than each breath. Okay?
Yeah.
So, we got called, my partner and I got called during my paramedics life, got called to an old man who was had been diagnosed with cancer. They had done everything for him they could at the hospital. They had told his family, we can let him die here or we can send him home to die at home. They said, well, let's bring him home so he can die in comfort. Well, they weren't as prepared as they thought they were. So about 10 o'clock one night, we got a call to go to this apartment in the projects, or one of the projects in Tallahassee. And here was an old man was laying in bed. He was like having, he was breathing. He had a pulse, but I was shaking him. I would just call him Mr. Johnson. This is in the book. And I was shaking him, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Johnson. And he was like, he wouldn't move. And so I leaned over close to him. And while I was leaning over, I reached under the bed, or run under his leg, so his family wouldn't see. But I was pinching him. I'm pinching his leg to see if I could elicit some response, like some pain, or to jerk his leg or something. Nothing, okay? And then I took my knuckle and I pressed it into his sternum. And you do that to somebody else for just a little bit, and they'll like be batting you away in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
That hurts like hell.
Yeah.
Okay? But that's just, but nothing. So he wasn't responding to verbal stimulus. He wasn't responding to pain. We were able to get a hold of his doctor. His doctor said, okay, explain to us, his situation. He said, apparently the family's not ready as they thought they were. Bring him into the hospital. We'll let him die here. And he said, no heroics, which meant no IVs, no monitor, don't do CPR on him. His time was coming. His time was there. And so we understood. We were just going to give him a ride to the hospital. All right. So we even bounced him over the grass. We weren't carrying the stretcher over the bumpy grass. We were bouncing him, like I said, just to kind of elicit some response from him in some way to wake him up. And so we, put him in the back of the ambulance, locked in the stretcher, closed the doors. I sat down next to him on the bench, and I started writing the run report. And as I was writing, I looked at him. He's right in front of me now, and I'm thinking, wait a minute. This man is dying. I said, he's not responding to any painful or verbal stimulus. I wonder if he'll respond to love. And so I set my run report on the bench next to me. And I leaned over, and I took the man's hand. And I took his left hand, because it was like his head was to my right, okay, horizontal like that. So I picked up his left hand, and I leaned over. And as I was holding his hand, I took a breath, a conscious breath. And I went, and I felt that gift of life come into me. And I exhaled, and the instant that I took that breath, Mr. Johnson opened his eyes, turned his head, he looked at me, he smiled, and he closed his eyes and died.
Wow.
It was like, that kind of thing was just like, whoa. I know, that's how I felt too, exactly. And even now, it's just like, that blew me away. That was not a coincidence. For him to respond to love, that showed me the value of this gift too, how powerful it can be. And it's all I did was just take that one conscious breath and felt that gift flow into me. It was almost like I was giving him permission to let go. This is where you're heading, brother.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, sir. I hope people buy your book. I'm definitely going to get a copy, and hopefully I can get one signed too.
Sure.
Yeah, final thoughts for the audience, sir. Thanks for your time tonight. This has been great.
Oh, no, I appreciate your asking me. I appreciate it. This, what can I say? This is, this book, I started it when I was living in Mexico, and took me a while to compose it, put it all together, but it's an easy read. Like I said, it's 100 pages. Even got some of my humor in it, basically, like I was halfway through is the appendix, and I put it in the middle of a book. I said, what I thought about is, my appendix is in the middle of my body, so why not put the appendix in the middle of the book? You know what I mean? I didn't want to call it the rectum, So that's so. But anyway, so yeah, it's and like I said, it's easy to read. You can get it Kindle or paperback. You saw that when you pulled up the link.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's less than $9 now. So it's less than $8 actually.
Yeah, $7.88 I think.
$7.88. Yeah.
That's a great deal for a book.
Yeah, and like I said, and it's an easy read, and there's it's just amazing some of the things that have happened to me, and they're all in here, So.
Thanks for sharing, Rick.
Yeah.
I want to give you a hug.
All right,
Appreciate
Eddie.
it, sir.
Yeah. You
Thank
too,
you.
man. Yeah, my pleasure.
I hope we can talk again one day.
Okay, well, we got a mutual friend here, so.
Definitely. Stay frosty, folks, and we'll see everybody next time.